So obviously today we're talking about player points and allowable player payments. So obviously that's salary cap. There's a little bit to get through, so I will push ahead and round back to those questions at certain points. Some of you will have done this before and will be familiar with it. That's okay. It's always good to have a bit of a refresher. And if you are new to this, please don't be overwhelmed. If at any time putting all of this stuff together you need help, happy to organise a time to sit down and go through that sort of stuff with you. So it's broken down into two parts. We'll start with player points first, both total team points and individuals. So player point system policy is the overarching policy which governs player points. The objectives of this policy actually sort of are encompassed in the Community Club Sustainability Program. Player points have a lot of objectives, but basically it boils down to allowing a more even distribution of players and sort of minimising over-recruiting, encouraging player loyalty. We'll get to it in a little while, but the longer a player is at a club, the points value reduces, so they're worth more to you in the long run. It reduces player movement, encourages investment in juniors through that home club player criteria, and like I said, overall club sustainability. We want you guys to be able to hold on to the players you've invested a lot of time in, and also have reward for those players who are committing to your club and staying around rather than jumping from one club to another. This this page as well is just pulled straight out of the player points policy, so if you ever want to refer back to it, you can. But yeah, that's just the objectives on the screen there for you. You may already be aware, or if you're sort of new to your role, this may be new to you, but there was a policy amendment to the player points and the salary cap policies last year. That was ticked off by the AFL Commission in September, so we've gone to a tiered structure now. The points have already been communicated to you in the back end of last year, and there was opportunity to appeal for additional points at that time. That time's since passed, so the points are set for this year. However, at the end of this season, the home and away rounds, you'll know where your points sit, and you can appeal off the back of that should you wish to apply for additional points. That goes to the AFL Barwon Ops Subcommittee. They review all those applications and will tick them off at that time. So for the moment, your total team points are set. They're all on the screen now. If you need them sent out to you again, please let me know. But that's what we will be rolling with this year. So total team points, as I said, everyone's got a limit that they need to stick to. These are all assigned in Play HQ for you, so you aren't able to select a lineup that exceeds that points. You need to select 9 players for the purpose of the policy. That's basically so you can't pick, 7 really heavy point players and load up on those players. It's to encourage a distribution of points. You can select up to 12 players, but you still can't exceed that points cap. Just because you're selecting 12 doesn't mean that cap goes up. You are restricted to that limit. There are fines if you do exceed that limit. It is quite hard to exceed that limit if you're selecting your lineup every week. Where you might get caught out is, say on a Saturday, Sally hurts her knee in the warm-up and you've got to pull someone from B grade up, but they're actually, they've come from another club and they're worth more points than Sally, and that's when you might get over that limit. So it's just really important to be mindful when managing those playing lists. Like I said, some of you will be really familiar with that, but just an abundance of caution on game day if that situation does occur for you. You would have also received an email from me before mid-Feb maybe, or maybe a little bit before then, with all of your squad lists. So what we basically did is had your lists from last year, worked out if they had a reduction, and we've sent them off to you to sort of cut out a lot of workload for you guys. What I need from the clubs is to let me know those new players so we can assess them, and also let us know if there's players who aren't returning so we can kind of move them off your list or sort of away from your group for the moment. So when we do go to assign points, it's a bit more of a streamlined process. Points will automatically roll over on Play HQ from the previous year, but say someone's going from a 3-pointer to a 2-pointer, we do have to go in and manually adjust those points. So getting those players registered early is really, really important. If it's the Friday before round 1 and it's after 5 p.m. and those points aren't assigned, they can't take the court. So, or if they do take the court, the points value that they are assigned is what is current. So just be really careful with that. I know it is hard sometimes getting A and B grade players registered, but just make sure that you get them registered as soon as possible. It'll save everyone some headaches in the long run. And it is quite a big job to do to put all those points in. So yeah, let's get on top of it early so it's all a little bit easier. In terms of individual player points, some of you will be familiar with this spreadsheet, and it is very, very overwhelming if you aren't familiar with it, but please, we'll go through it now and hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier for you. When you are sending through those squad lists, it's really important that you give me a little bit of background as to who the player is. You know, there could be several Sarah Smiths out there. So if you say Sarah Smith, who played at Kangaroo Flat in the Bendigo Footy Netball League last year, that gives us a good starting point to be able to assess their points fairly. And if you guys think you know what their points value is, you can send that through as well, because that'll help us. But basically, when looking at this spreadsheet, the first thing you want to do is identify is if that player has played 40 junior club games at your club. That now includes up to 19 and under age group. So if they've played 40 junior games, they're a 1 point player for your club. It's never going to change. If they move and come back, they'll always be 1 point. From there, if they're not a home club player, we go to the top of the list and then work our way down. You know, you might recruit someone thinking they're an A grade player, but if they've played VNL in the last 2 seasons, well, they're actually worth more points. So it's really important to start at the top and work your way down to find their points value. From there, once you've got that points value, we look at stage 2, which is where additional points may be applied. So say you're moving from within the BFL to another BFL club, you get an additional point. If you go from the BFL to the GFL or the GFL to the BFL, there's not an additional point there. It's only in that movement within the same league that extra point is applied. A player will also get an extra point if they've participated at 3 clubs in 3 years. So they might have gone, I'll use Kangaroo Flat again, and then they've gone to Ocean Grove, and then they've gone to Torquay, for example. They would get an extra point for having played at 3 clubs in the previous 3 seasons. It doesn't matter if they only played 1 game, if they've played at 3 clubs in 3 seasons, that's where that assessment will come from. The other thing to consider in stage 2 is the years of service. So that's something that we'll touch on a little bit later as well. But that is that loyalty promoting piece where if a player hangs around at your club, they'll reduce in value each year to eventually be a 1 pointer. The minimum that anyone will be is a 1 pointer. You can't be any less than that. So talking about the years of service, you have to have qualified in a senior grade for a year of service to be applied. So if you recruit a junior player from a Ballerine or a GFL club, they'll come across as a 3-pointer, as a transferred junior. If they play at your club for a year, they have to have played in a senior grade for that point value to be reduced. Everyone's assessed at their point of transfer, so they might come across to you in under 17s, and then the following year play in your A grade squad. If they didn't play seniors that year, they'll still be that 3-point player due to their point of transfer. 19 and under and below games don't count towards season of service. It's only that senior grade. But on the flip side, it does count towards that home club eligibility status. If there's anyone you're ever in doubt with, please let us know. We've got the old records from my netball and some even older records from NMAS if we need to check them. If you do need those records checked, just please provide maiden names as well, as those records are quite old. Reassessment. So if you've got an individual player who has come to your club, we've assessed their points, and you don't think that that assessment is fair, maybe they were forced to move to Geelong, for example, for work or for study, and, you know, we've applied an extra point for 3 clubs in 3 years, but that last move was forced. You can apply to the player points panel for review. The player points panel, we'll get to that in a little while, but they'll assess the criteria and be able to tick off whether or not they approve the reassessment, essentially. The grounds for that are outlined in the player points policy document, which we'll touch on at the end. And it's really important that if you are putting in a request, that it ticks off the criteria in that document. Long emotive sort of really emotive cases won't be considered. It's got to hit the criteria. It's just for for an equity stand piece. We want it to be fair across the board. All of these documents are available on the AFL Barwon website as well. We'll send them out after the seminar, and they've been in the bulletin the last couple of weeks as well. Like I said, so the player points panel, it's comprised of a mixture of operations staff and some GDFL representatives as well. Looks after the netball reassessments as well as the footy reassessments. We all work off the PPSP bylaws. That's the criteria that needs to be ticked off before any reassessments will be considered. And we'll let you know 24 hours after the fact. So we'll meet every Wednesday, review the information provided, and you'll have an answer by the end of Thursday. So you can move forward. The other thing to consider as well is that if you get your points assessment back and the player has been assigned, say, 3 points, and you guys are looking to appeal to have it reduced to 2 for whatever reason, if that player plays with that 3-point value, then the reassessment is not considered. Once they take the court with that value, it will hold. Unless there's an error on our part in terms of having applied the criteria wrong, for example. If you're not happy with the decision of the player points panel, you can appeal to the operations subcommittee. For that to be warranted, you just have to outline that the PPP did not apply the considerations properly. The operations subcommittee meet regularly, and you'll be advised of when they're likely to meet off the back of this, and you'll be advised within 7 days of that outcome. From there, there's no further appeal. I don't think we've had any netball ones go to commission for appeal for individual player points in the last little while, but if you need to, that opportunity is available to you as well. That was a lot of information on player points. Chloe, how's the chat going?
Nothing in the chat so far.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Like I said, there's a lot to burn through and there's a lot of information, but if at any stage you think of anything or want to organise a time to chat, please do. But yeah, please continue to get those squad lists to me as soon as you can, and we'll get those points assessed back to you as well as assigned in Play HQ. All right, so allowable player payments that are known as salary cap. I'll go through a couple of examples towards the end of this section, and if we have time, I'll actually run you through how to fill out the budget spreadsheet. That's something that a lot of people tend to get stuck on with the auto calculations and exempt amounts and things like that, but we'll work towards that and get to that if we get to it. If not, a recording of that will be available on the Education Hub. So similar to the player points, it's all part of the community club sustainability program. We don't want clubs to be spending more money than they have. We also don't want them to feel like they need to spend big money to compete. By having a salary cap, it makes it a little bit more equitable. You know, some clubs have the ability to spend well above the salary cap. Some clubs may not. So by bringing that in, has enabled clubs to have more control over their spending, better budgeting practices, and hopefully keep clubs long-term sustainable. There has been some stories, you know, across the state of clubs spending more than they've had. We don't want that to be the case here. I think one thing to know as well is that while there is a salary cap, you do not have to spend that full amount. I really like to emphasise that. There's no requirement for you to, you know, crunch every last dollar and cent to fill that amount. If you're saving money and it's a good exercise for your club, that's how we want it to be. So similar to the points, we're in a tiered structure for salary cap as well. Same thing with that appeals process. That was back in September. If you want to appeal at the end of this season, same process. It's got to be to the operations subcommittee, and they'll consider those on a case-by-case basis. Some deadlines for this one include the budget spreadsheet, which we'll go through a little bit later on, as well as the 2 versions of a contract. So we've got a standard player declaration and a non-declared player statement. We'll touch on those a little bit further, but all of that documentation needs to be to myself by the 30th of April. So you've still got a bit of time up your sleeves, but if you have a look at it in the next week or so and feel like you're a bit out of your depth or not quite sure, please reach out. I'm more than happy to sit down and have a conversation and sort of work through how to put it together for you, so you are best set up for this season. It's a good exercise to do the budget, so then you know where you're placed, and gives you a good grasp on spending for the season. Just those player payment limits for you again. I think, yeah, you should all be aware of that, but if you're not, please yell out. So standard player declaration. The main differentiation between the standard player declaration and the non-declared player statement is that one is for players who are going to be paid for playing A grade, and then the other is for those who aren't. So any player who is taking the court in A grade who is going to be paid needs to have one of these contracts, or this contract needs to be worked into your club contracts. All of this detail, you're welcome to, work into your club code of conducts and behavioural standards and things like that. But all of this information is what needs to be included. Again, this is all on the A4 Barwon website and we'll distribute it. These are the contracts that we need by the 30th of April. If you don't get it to us before then, or you get a player who joins your squad late and decides to take the court and you decide you're going to pay them, you have to submit it to us within 7 days. We'll do checks on these regularly based on games played records and things like that to make sure we're up to date. But please do your best to either get them all to us at the start of the season, even if it's someone who's in B grade that might not actually play A grade, just so you don't have to chase things through the season when things get a little bit chaotic. The one thing I will point out on this is that we've got a new dot point here. It was introduced last year, but I just want to emphasize it again, is that we are expecting that the players, when you sign them, are being truthful about where they've come from, so you guys don't get caught out with their points values. So be really cautious to have conversations with your players about where they've played, where they've come from, just so you don't get caught out as to having missed part of their playing history that might impact that points value. Anything in the chat just yet, Chloe?
No, not yet.
Perfect. So yes, this is just a zoomed in version. Hopefully it's a little bit more clear for you all here. But I'll just run through how you would fill this out. So player name up the top, club here, and then whether it's the Geelong or Ballerine Footy Netball League. And I would be putting an October date here, saying it's valid until the end of the season, just to cover off all of September. For example, you might have a player who's being paid $30 to play A grade, so you'd pop $30 here, and you're not paying them a different rate, whether or not it's lost or drawn, so you'd put $30 here. You can do different rates for lost or drawn matches. It's up to you. It is probably easier to budget, if it's all the one figure, but it's entirely up to your club what you want to do. If you were, for example, had an A grade player that was going to play between A and B grade because you've got a squad or you've recruited really well and you're going to pay them for their B grade games, you'd put that information here, but it still would be included in your salary cap. So that's something to really consider. Not something that is common practice by any means, but something that is worth mentioning regardless for when you see this line. Incentives, so you might say that it might be a $10 for a best on court payment each week. You'd outline that here. It might not go to this player every week, but it may, that's something that is on offer. Or you might have something in there about like $50 for winning the club best and fairest in this detail as well. Again, not compulsory, but if you are paying incentives of any kind, they need to be in the contract. The other things you should consider are whether or not you're paying their club membership for them, the Netball Victoria membership. If there's anything that you are paying on behalf of the player, that is included as a player payment. There are exempt amounts that we'll get to a little bit later, but regardless, anything that they are getting paid needs to be included here. Even if they're, say, umpiring, you might put their umpiring fee in here. That is an amount that can be exempt, but we'll get to that a little bit later. And again, just this section here is that new dot point. And last but not least, if the player's under 18, that needs to be co-signed by a guardian. So the non-declared player statement is for anyone who's not going to get paid if they take the court in A grade, and they've agreed to that. They're happy. You could get everyone to sign this all at once and just tick it off at the start of the season. This is something you might say, you might be a club that offers the B grade player, if they step up to A grade, payment for taking the court, or you might make the decision that no, if B grade get an opportunity, none of them are going to get paid. This is the contract that they would all fill out. You might even have an A grade player who doesn't want to play for payment. They would sign this as well. My advice again is that if you are, whichever way you're going to go, I would encourage you to get your B grade contract signed as well, just so you are all covered and you're not having to chase things up throughout the season. The alternative is you can do it within 7 days, but history will show that within 7 days is sometimes difficult to achieve for a lot of clubs. You're all volunteers, and it does take time to chase players down. Chloe, anything just yet?
No, you're all good.
Perfect. And I do feel like I've said this several times, but I just want to emphasize that I do think it's important to be as prepared as you can. Try and get all of the A and B contracts, declarations, all that budget stuff sorted early, as well as maintain that budget through the year. If you get a player who's out through injury, just make a note of it so you know how you're tracking. You might have more money available, you might have less money available. It's just good practice to be across all of that sort of stuff. All right, so now this is the spreadsheet that I was referring to a little bit earlier, and I promise it's not scary. It actually does all of the work for you. This spreadsheet needs to be submitted to myself by the 30th of April. It needs to outline, all of the rates of payment that you're paying an A grade player, as well as those non-declared players. So they would go down the bottom here. We'll go into this in a little bit of detail in the next section. All right, so this spreadsheet will auto-calculate for you, and I'll say that 100 times because some people feel like they need to do all the calculations themselves. You don't. This is the start of that spreadsheet for the standard player declaration players. So I've used Sally and Mary as our examples here. Sally's going to be away for one game because she's going to Thailand on a holiday. So we can budget that she's only going to play the 17 games at $50. That amount is auto-calculated here, and it's also carried across here. They're not playing B grade at all. They're part of your A grade team. So we don't have to put anything there. You may have B grade players that you're looking to pay. They might sign a contract for however much, say it's $50 as well. You would pop their details in here, say whoever that player is. They might play 4 games through injury at $50, and then they might play 16 games, but at $0 for those other games. That's how you would fill that out. But if there's any other variation to that situation that you need help with, please let me know and we can go through it. I touched on this before, but Jane is one of the B grade players in this example. She signed the non-declared player statement. She's going to fill in for A grade 6 times over the course of the year, or we think she might fill in 6 times, but for the rest of the season, she's just going to play in B grade. So she's not, we don't have to record her those games over here. You might have players that aren't going to be playing A grade at all. You could put the entire B grade squad here and just say 0 games here. Then that's all recorded at the end of the season. Say they do take the court in 2 games, then you can just come in here, edit this figure, and you're good to go. We will check the number of games everyone's played and make sure it's all represented at the end of the year when you have to submit this spreadsheet again as your actuals. So it is good practice to make sure that this information is all up to date, whether or not you do it through the year or at the end of the season. But just do whatever works for you, and as always, yell out if you need any help with this one. Incentives. So this is one that comes up a lot. For example, in this one, I've said that we're doing a $30 for best on court each week. It might get announced at Thursday night dinner. That total amount across 18 games will pre-populate here and be calculated. Same thing with first place best and fairest. That $100 amount is going in here. It's not assigned to any player, so you don't have to put that detail here. You just know that whoever it does go to is going to get that extra $100. When we submit the actuals at the end of the season, that is when you would put the name of the players in here who have received that extra amount, so that if your club is one who is audited, that all lines up for that process. Non-cash incentives greater than $300 a week or greater than $100 per player should also be included here. So if you're giving out fuel vouchers or things like that that exceed that amount, need to be included here. You can have non-cash incentives that you give out below $100 per player to a max of $300 per week. That has to be non-cash though. So for clarity, that could be like a meal voucher that's donated by a sponsor, and it must be given in the form of an award if it's a non-cash incentive. It can't just be a voucher that you're handing out. It needs to be in the form of an award, and there is a cap on that as well. That is one that we do get a lot of questions on. So if you have any situations like that you want to touch on, please let me know and we'll go through it. But basically, say you had $100 value of a non-cash voucher, you could only give that to 3 players a week. You wouldn't be able to give it to your whole squad. That's how it would be broken down. All right, exempt amounts. So there are exemptions that are considered. So umpiring payments are one. You might have A-grade players who umpire as well, but they get paid for it. That's all well and good. It just needs to be submitted to AFL Barwon via Rule 8D, which we'll touch on in a minute. But there are amounts that are exempt. Playing coaches that have an exempt amount. There's a few different situations where money can be exempt. The main thing is when we're filling this out is that we have to record the initial amount as well as the amount that gets deducted. Just so when this bottom bit here auto-calculates, it'll add the $400 in Mary's situation here and then deduct it here. So for our example here, Mary Williams, she's a sports trainer, so she's getting paid for that. That club's applied to AFL Barwon under Rule 8D to say that Mary's a sports trainer. What we're paying for her for is within her line of work. It's at market rate. You know, we're not paying her well above that. We're just paying her what she would be paid otherwise. And that's all been ticked off, so it gets reported in this section here. Similarly with Sally, with the new exemptions that have come in the last 2 seasons, because she's the solo D-grade coach and she's an A-grade player, up to $450 would be exempt for her. So her $200 amount, it would be entered here, and we'd also enter it down here as well, just so it's added and then deducted in the total value. You can clearly see I haven't done a full budget in this situation. I've just popped a few examples in, but you can kind of get the gist of where the calculations come from. So like I touched on, Rule 8D, a club may at any time submit to the AFL Barwon Commission true, complete and accurate particulars of all payments, considerations, advantages or other benefits given, provided or applied or proposed to be given, provided or applied to or for the benefit of a player and or any associate of the player, with a request that the AFL Barwon Commission issue a ruling as to whether such payments, considerations, advantages or other benefits constitute player payments and as to their value for the purposes of this rules. Obviously that is very, very wordy, but basically what is that is saying is that a club has the opportunity to apply to the Commission for money to fall outside of the salary cap if it aligns to certain things. So it might be that, yeah, you've got umpires who are umpiring or they're fulfilling a role at your club that's you know, a paid role, and then you're paying them market value. It's nothing more than that, and they can demonstrate that they are actually undertaking that role. That's where those sort of funds would be exempt. Other situations that have come to the Commission for this have been something like fundraisers. You know, you might be fundraising for a player for a certain reason. You know, it may or may not get passed, but that's something that would be considered under this rule. If there's any situation that you've got, please yell out, but sports trainer one's really common, umpires really common, ones that are probably less common, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but they're probably the main few that we do see. That's why in the previous example, Mary's got ticked off. It was aligned with her line of work, and yeah, she was being paid market rate. That's a really important thing to consider when making an application. You need to outline what you're paying them and whether or not that is considered to be appropriate. Playing coaches. This is one that comes up a lot, but basically, for the purpose of player payments, if you're a playing coach, 50% of your payment is included in the cap and 50% is exempt. So what we would see in the previous example, say a coach is being paid $1,000 as the A grade coach, $1,000 would go in that top box, and then $500 would go in that bottom box to deduct it. This actually now only applies if they're going to take the court in more than 4 games, 4 or more rather, where, you know, that's someone who you've recruited, they're a playing coach, they're going to play for the whole season. There's a maximum amount that is exempt. So $5,000 is the max that can be exempt. We'll get to a couple of examples in a minute, but say you're paying a coach 11 grand, which I don't know of anyone paying that specific amount, but you might have, that means that $6,000 would be included within the cap because that maximum of $5,000 is what would sit outside it. That was a lot of words. Do I have any questions on that one, Chloe?
No, not yet.
Perfect. So like I touched on, there's a pro rata here. So you might have a coach that you sign and they get injured in the preseason, or they might get pregnant, or they might not be planning to play, but then you're really short 1 week, so end up taking the court. This is where this pro rata amount comes in. I won't go through it all here. You can read it on the screen. It is in the policy, but it's basically what would happen if they take the court in 1 game, 2 games, or 3 games. The big thing to consider here is that exempt amount does vary. So it's not always 5,000. It's sort of prorated based on the amount that the base is worked off. I would always encourage you to budget for the worst case scenario. So budget for the coach to take the court for more than 4 games, or just be really clear on what parameters you can work within should they decide to take the court or be taking the court. Or the opposite might happen. They might have intended to play for the whole season, become injured, and now you've got to fill that spot. Now you've got a good insight as to where your funds are going to sit. Full-time playing coaches. So like I said before, this is the example. Kelly in this example has been paid $4,000 as the coach. She's also being paid $50 per game. That amount is reported separately up the top, but her $4,000 to coach the team is listed here. The exempt amount is $2,000. The exempt amount doesn't apply to her match payments. Her match payments are considered separate, and this is where her coaching payment is considered. And you can see here, the $4,000 amount has been added to whatever's at the top, the $2,000 is taken out, and then this is what your final expenditure is. So you want this bottom number to be under your prescribed salary cap. That's the main thing you want to consider. So co-coaching, there is also exempt amounts for co-coaches. This example we'll talk to if you've got a playing coach and a non-playing coach. In this section 2, this has increased. It used to be 25% that was exempt, but now it's increased to 50%. So you've got a little bit more money to play with there. Nothing too crazy, but hopefully that is a win for the clubs. Like I said, that was in place last season as well, but if you haven't had a playing coach before or in a couple of years, that might be something that's new to you. So in example 1, non-playing coach is being paid $5,000. That's all good, not included in the cap because they're not playing. But our playing coach has got $2,500 in the cap, $2,500 exempt from the cap. That $5,000 would be listed in that top section, and that $2,500 would be listed in that bottom section. Similarly here, we've got a bigger amount here. So this is where that maximum amount exempt comes in. So our playing coach in this situation is being paid $10,000, but only a maximum of $2,500 can be exempt. So that's where this is the amount that would be not in the cap. This is the amount that would be in the cap. So you'd be putting that $2,500 amount in the bottom part of that spreadsheet. Again, this is quite a lot of words and might seem a little bit confusing. If you feel a bit overwhelmed after the fact, please let me know and we can go through it. These are just some more examples for for two co-coaches. These are both playing. That title slide's wrong. But same thing, it's up to 50% of the total payments to both coaches. So you can see here that it says an exempt amount of $2,500 per coach. So $2,500 here and $2,500 here. It's at 50% of that payment. I won't go through this one again because it's very clear cut. It's only a $5,000 amount. They're not breaching that $2,500 per coach exemption. It's a lot simpler when the value does fall within that maximum exempt amount. This is that new one that I spoke about. It was introduced last season, I believe, off the top of my head. But we wanted to encourage, or we had feedback from clubs that we wanted seniors to be encouraged to coach junior teams, and because a lot of our A-grade players in the region are quite talented, we wanted to reward them for their time that they're donating. So where an A-grade player coaches an open age team other than A-grade, or a highest graded 19 and under and 17 and under team, so Div 1, the payment to the player for coaching this team must be specifically identified in that player declaration, and any remuneration to a maximum of $450 will not be considered a player payment. So, Sally is an A-grade player and she's going to get $500 to coach C-grade. We'd put that $500 amount in that top section and then $450 in the exempt amount. $50 is all that would be included in the cap. So it gives a little bit of reprieve and an incentive for our senior players to be able to coach. The other thing to consider is that any remuneration paid to the player by or on behalf of the club is to be included as a player payment. So again, if you're going to pay for their club membership, if you're going to pay for their Netball Victoria membership, that will be included as a player payment, but it can come under that $450. You just need to report it. So again, if you get stuck, just yell out with that one. All of the information that I've spoken to you about today is available via the player points system policy and PPSP bylaws documents. That's a lot of P's in that sentence. These used to be 2 documents, but we've put them together in the one, prettied it up on Canva. We haven't quite got to that for the player payment guidelines and the player payment rules just yet, but we will. It's all on this website here. Like I said, we will send this out after the fact so you can quickly access it, but you can find it on our website as well. All of those exempt amount sort of situations will be in the player payment guidelines section. That'll outline all of those parameters in greater detail for you. The player payment rules is the real technical structure behind the rules, and it'll talk to Rule 8D and those considerations. So good to have a read over both of them. This will probably be the document you use the most, but it is one to be aware of. Chloe, anything just yet?
No, nothing at all.
I can see a question here, Soph. So we've got Kyle's asked, do you need to be a sole coach for this $450 exemption, or is it available for co-coaches?
I will triple check the wording of the document on that one. I believe it's okay for co-coaches, but it's a maximum of 2 co-coaches, so it can't be 3, but I will triple check that one and round back to you. If you maybe want to flick me an email just so I can come back to you, that would be super, but I'll triple check that one.
Thanks, Soph.
No worries. The other couple of resources I'll touch on that aren't pertaining to player payments and player points is the preseason manual, which you'll have all got. So that's got the registration stuff and how to set those forms up for you. Please have a look at that if you haven't already, and get your forms set up so we can get those players registered and those points assigned. The other thing that we're going to distribute is a matchday operations manual, very similar to that preseason handbook, with just a lot of step-by-steps for those people who may be new to the roles, to help them in their netball admin journey. We will have a meeting a little bit down the track and closer to the season to go through a few overarching topics, such as what we're doing in the umpiring space this season, and netball in general, which will be really exciting. But I'll send all that out separately. So the main takeaway is just those, that preseason document, have a look at that one if you haven't already, and get those registration forms set up. But yeah, player points, if you can get those back to me as soon as you can. I know a lot of clubs have finished their trials now. I think there's a couple that might still be sort of settling their squads, but the sooner you can get that list to me, the better. And please send through those B grade players as well, because they're most likely to take the step up into A grade if there is an injury. And if they're assigned at the start of the season, it takes the stress off you guys. All of that player payment stuff needs to be back to me by the 30th of April. So that's the budget as well as the contracts. Or if you've got someone who joins the squad late, that needs to be here within 7 days of them taking the court. Yeah, like I said, if there's anything you need, please send me an email or give me a call. If you don't have my number, please reach out and I'll make contact. But yeah, that's it from me. I'll see some of you later, I would dare say, in the Play HQ session. But thanks for tuning in.